But first, the Australian Energy Regulator has released a draft decision to lift price caps for hundreds of thousands of customers on energy companies' default offers from July 1. And what was the rationale from the Sydney Morning Herald in its reporting? Well, a year of low wind and rain, sudden coal generator breakdowns and elevated fossil fuel costs pushed up wholesale prices. Now, cap rises could increase household power bills by up to $200 a year. And the SMH did acknowledge that this was a problem for Anthony Albanese and that prices had risen despite assurances from Albo and Co prior to the last election. Anyway, it went on to refer to comments by the Energy Minister, which went totally unchallenged. Bowen said more renewables were needed to cut prices and attacked the opposition for its energy policy, which includes building nuclear power plants across the country and limiting the rollout of renewable energy. Here is what Bowen had to say in his presser.
One of the reasons for this decision today is spikes caused by coal-fired power stations breaking down. Not a day in the last 2 years have we had a coal-fired power station not break down somewhere in Australia. Not talking about planned maintenance, I'm talking about unexpected breakdowns which then see energy prices spike.
Anyway, back to the SMH, and it went on to say that Dutton has criticised the government's eggs in one basket renewables policy and said a balanced energy mix, including gas and nuclear, was needed. He has claimed that the opposition's nuclear policy would cut energy bills by 44% by 2050. And that experts, including the CSIRO, have rejected that claim, stating that a grid dominated by renewables and backed by massive expansion in transmission lines, pumped hydro and batteries would be significantly cheaper. But SMH readers would know that the reason coal and gas are so expensive is because of Labor's crippling net zero laws, a mistruth repeated that renewables are bringing down power prices. Of course, they're quick to debunk Dutton but offer no scrutiny of the Energy Minister. Interesting, the piece was published at 9:06 a.m. yesterday, but was heavily updated at 6:22 p.m. last night. Thankfully, Simon Benson at The Australian pulled the handbrake up on the Energy Minister, noting that Bowen's default position on prices is to blame the industry rather than acknowledge the pressures Labor policy has injected into the market, and signs off by stating that the Albanese government has had 3 years to fix this problem. Subsidising power bills is not the long-term answer. Well, that sounds pretty logical. But here is Bowen's solution. Again, unchallenged by the SMH and other soft-left media.
I think these figures show an important opportunity to remind Australians that you can do better and shop around for a better deal. Now, we've made it easier in the Albanese government to switch energy providers, and there are 2 websites which are very useful.
Joining me now on the panel is Sky News contributor Louise Roberts and Radio 2CC host Stephen Chinnatempo. Louise, look, we can all see that power prices are going up. It's happening before our very eyes, and yet no substantive criticism of the minister. How can that sort of balance not be present, given the significance of this particular energy issue?
Well, the federal government and Chris Bowen's failure to deliver on their promise of a $275 cut to our power bills is shameful to all Australians, and I would include readers of the SMH in that. So feasibly, they should expect their publication of choice to challenge the government on this, rather than use it as an opportunity to pump out propaganda about how coal-fired power is to blame for these sky-high power prices. It just beggars belief that they haven't actually gone in and actually addressed the key issue, which is why is our power so expensive, and what's the government doing about it when they claim to have fixed it, when of course clearly they haven't. It just, you think you're reading it some sort of, alternative publication rather than a mainstream newspaper.
And Steve, we just need to shop around. That's it. Nothing more. I find that obviously extraordinary from the Energy Minister, but we know that renewable energy isn't cheaper, and we know that manufacturing nations across the world rely on nuclear. How is that context, which quite frankly is pretty important, it's always missed or diminished?
Well, look, there's a couple of points here. I mean, the first thing is, shop around for what? For a bunch of energy providers who have all seen their costs go up. So no matter where you go, your energy prices are going up. And how's that $275 discount going, by the way? But the reality is here that I think a lot of media outlets are afraid to challenge the CSIRO, who have got their figures wrong. And anybody who digs a little bit deeper into how they've come up with their numbers, you can actually see the flaw in their modelling. But I think I've always maintained that a lot of journalists are lazy and they'll just use whatever drops in their lap. And if the CSIRO comes out and says the sky is green, then that's what they'll run with. But if you dig a little bit deeper and find out why the sky is green, you see that the modelling doesn't actually take into account the full cost of the renewables rollout, particularly the rewiring of Australia, and it doesn't also allow for the longevity of nuclear power plants. But the thing that Chris Bowen misses here is the reason that coal-fired power stations are breaking down is because there's no certainty for the operators to actually maintain them because they don't know when they're going to be switched off.
On to our next topic, and the Trump derangement syndrome afflicted lefties, well, they've joined Albo to have a sook about the USA's position on tariffs, carrying on like jilted lovers. How can they not care about us anymore? Trump is such a big meanie. Now, Matthew Knott from the SMH went with the special friendship is over. Trump doesn't care about Australia. Also at the SMH, Peter Hartcher's piece was titled, Trump has done us a favour by showing us where we stand during peacetime. Nikki Hutley at The Guardian proffered Trump's senseless tariffs will extend the economic malaise felt by so many in Australia and around the world. According to The Guardian, this is a painful global lesson into why we should listen to rather than denigrate the experts. I think there's a few people who would beg to differ. Anyway, and Bernard Keane, well, he got the strops on as well because Albo, he must ignore the bootlickers, get off his knees and punch back at Trump. Meanwhile, thankfully, others took a more practical approach, pointing out that while some of this should be a wake-up call for the government, the correct response is to get serious about improving the Australian economy, diversifying our trade, and there is no point in bashing the Yanks. For example, Robert Godlibson, as per usual, arrived with some common sense. The US snubs Australia, but there are ways. Here's how we can offset Trump's tariffs. Steve, look, granted, it's a pretty unfriendly thing for an ally to do, but is the media, are they covering for a lacklustre government performance here?
Look, to a certain extent they are, but look, I don't buy into the all-in with Trump mentality of some people on the right. I mean, Trump can be wrong, and with these tariffs he is wrong, not only from a perspective of his relationship with Australia and his other partners, but it's not good for the American economy either. I don't necessarily think he understands what these tariffs do, because he made the comment the other day that these tariffs are going to raise so much money that he won't know what to spend it on. Well, if they work, they won't raise a single dollar. That's how tariffs work. But the reality is here that, yeah, I mean, the media in this country, or certain sections of the media, have been running cover for the government for the whole 3 years they've been in, and we can't, despite the fact that I think America has done the wrong thing by Australia in this, we can't discount the inability of the Australian government to maintain our most important partnership. Now, you can blame Trump all you like, but we can't even get a phone call with the bloke because our government's on the nose. Why? Because we've got Australia's second worst Prime Minister in Washington as our ambassador, Australia's worst ever Prime Minister in the Lodge, who can't even get a phone call with the President, and Australia's third worst ever Prime Minister in Malcolm Turnbull sniping from the sidelines. So put all that together, why would the American administration want to talk to us? So once the adults get back into power, I think we can probably smooth this over, but you're not going to hear that from certain media outlets.
Don't hold back, Steve. And Louise, look, does our domestic media take too narrow a view on these sorts of things?
Look, I think they do. I mean, to Stephen's point as well, that, you know, they have to look at this globally and actually work out what the strategy is for dealing with the fact that we now have these tariffs, instead of making it all about the sort of anti-Trump narrative and sort of weeping into their lattes about the end of the special relationship between the US and Australia, which of course is nowhere near close to the truth at all. So I would like to see a bit more discussion, a bit more robust discussion about what it means now. I mean, Robert's piece was a classic example of that, I think, as you've pointed out, Caroline.